There we go, live again with miniature modelling mayhem. And it truly is mayhem tonight because we're joined by both Mark and King Edzard, who's just recovering from a bout in a North Korean prisoner of war camp, as we understand it.
Prince Edzard.
King,
of the Rhine. Prince Edzard of the Rhine, please get it right.
He'll do anything for money, that Edzard.
So yeah, there's...
You've all done very well. What do you do?
Well enough for me to grace you with my presence.
I did everything I could.
We are on it.
I did everything I could, Edzard, to get you killed in that episode, and you survived.
What's going on, everybody?
Dennis as well.
Hello.
You realise if you had killed Edzard that it would be blue blood.
Oh my God, Edzard, I haven't talked to you in like half a year.
Prison.
Oh, hello.
That's what it was.
Wow. He's been busy with royal engagements.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Made some new connections in prison.
Yeah.
Good business opportunities there. I found the landing schedule for German troops.
All right.
If you want that.
Nice.
Yeah, please. Yes, please.
What, landing where?
Canada. Airfield near The Hague.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
We've got a lot. We've got so much information, but I need everything that you can get because it's a one shot. So I can't reshoot it. So yeah. Please.
Well, in essence, they landed almost 1,000 Germans.
Yeah.
But this gives the time and the day and what units.
Mm-hmm.
Well, give it one thing to the Germans. They were very kept good records and they were very prompt.
Funnily enough, the records for Normandy are pretty shocking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Sasha Distel, Johnny Holiday, what do you expect? I was watching a video last night about the V2s, and apart from the space flights they did from Nordhausen, the first space flight that wasn't in Germany was actually from Holland.
Of course, yeah.
Where they launched the first V2 that hit Chiswick.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, technically, the first space flight was the Paris guns in World War One.
Right.
Was it the Baron von Munchausen? In what was it? 17.
Well, no, not that. No, I mean like the first man-made object to go into the stratosphere. Whatever was the bullets from the Paris guns that they were shooting at.
But I'll take you back to antiquity. What about the flight of Icarus?
Yeah,
you know, I don't think he reached
things from an Iron Maiden song. I don't believe.
Yeah, I don't think he reached the outer limits of space with the Icarus flight. No.
Doubter.
Splitter. It's very difficult to get wax to adhere once you reach the stratosphere.
Well, that was where he went wrong, wasn't it?
Yeah. Wrong wax.
Went too high.
Yes.
Of course, if we had some Greek people on tonight, they'd say, well, that's because he flew too close to the sun.
Yeah,
so that means he must have gone near the sun.
Well, that's what I mean. He was too high. So too high, too far, too fast. Got cocky. If he had been a Macedonian, it would never have happened.
No.
Macedonians.
Somebody would still have had to pay to the figures over 5 years.
Speaking of Macedonians, I finally got the last of my Romans from Warlord and from Black Tree Design.
All right.
Yeah, after screwing up my order. Yeah.
Is it the early Imperial ones you're doing?
I'm now no expert. I just bought a bunch of Warlord ones, and I got some secondhand, unbuilt.
I'm sure it'll be close enough.
Yeah, Romans.
Yeah, close
Well,
enough.
they're only 1,000 years. I probably did screw it up though. I've got Velites and I don't think they had Velites in England when they were up there. So, but whatever. I'll just use them as like.
They certainly didn't have them. They certainly didn't have them in the Empire. That's Republican stuff. Edzard, hold me back. hold me back, Edzard.
Edzard's got a vein
Calm
popping.
me down.
Edzard's got a vein popping in his forehead just now.
It'll be Triarian Hastati next. Oh God, Gribe.
Hey, I know nothing about this stuff. What do you want me to do, man?
Oh yeah.
I know we've got these V-lights. I mean, go and subscribe.
But here's the thing: if you're an expert, though, you can help me with color schemes.
Yeah.
Well, it was Romans. It was all red, wasn't it?
Well, that's the thing. I don't want to do all red.
Red and
Mine-
yellow.
Actually, mine are red.
Well, no, I'm not saying it's bad. It's just I don't know.
I think the most common would be like Undyed Wolf, basically.
That's what I was thinking. And then maybe having like a red stripe along the hem
That'd be nice.
or the shields, maybe.
Or you could do them in the proper colours that they would have had at the time, which is pink, because they couldn't bloody fix the dye to the clothes, so it would all run.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
Wouldn't it be like more of an orange?
I would have thought it would have been pink.
Could fix the colours because they used urine.
Yeah, but not very well. Not well enough to do when you're marching across half of Europe in the rain.
Yeah.
Surely it didn't rain back then.
Hence the Scottish expression which was used in the tanning industry, pish.
Right, how do I send this to you, Mark?
Just on email or anything, mate. Messenger or anything, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's easy.
Raven.
Yeah, Sibrin sent a load of stuff to Sam in Russia as well. So we've got to sift through it all and see what we can do.
Where did it go?
We get into a very interesting discussion on, was it Sunday? Yeah, it's with Bill about what effect Spain entering the Second World War on the Axis' side would have had.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Whether it would have made any substantial difference or just resulted in Germany getting nuked rather than Japan.
Yeah.
Well, they would have had a 3-hour-long lunch break for a start.
Yeah. Well, the general consensus was it would have had a major impact on the Mediterranean.
Yeah, I think it would.
So if you take that as a starting point, that either we would have lost Gibraltar
Yeah, Gibraltar would have gone.
and possibly then Malta,
Yep.
and then potentially North Africa.
Yep.
I sent you two.
I suppose that would depend on how. Well, yeah.
Because we couldn't supply it.
No.
We probably wouldn't have got involved in Greece.
I don't know anything about the Spanish Navy. How big was that?
I think it was more the fact that the Germans could have had aircraft basically covering the strait, and at the same time they could have had U-boat bases right on the, right down the coast of Spain type thing.
Yeah, Franco didn't like him, did he? And Hitler despised Franco. And that I found quite strange.
Did he despise him because he didn't join in his
in his holy
endeavours?
Yeah.
I don't know that much about it myself. I'll have to ask the wife, who's an expert on Spanish history.
Yeah.
She actually wrote to General Franco.
What?
In a sort of Miss Jean Brodie style.
Was she responsible?
She is responsible. Yeah.
She's responsible for him quitting.
Mm.
He got a horrible letter from a woman, and
Thank God she's not listening.
you know,
I think you're confusing her with her mother,
right, okay.
but they're not far different, mate.
It's an incredibly interesting war, that Spanish Civil War, isn't it? I read Beauvoir's work, which I think is... I like Anthony Beauvoir. I think he's a very good author. And he sort of made a bit of rhyme and reason to it, but it was so complex, wasn't it? I mean, there was interscene factions fighting each other. There was... I mean, Germany, you know, they used it as their testing ground, didn't they? And Italy joined in because that's the Italian way. And I think that's probably what Hitler was so pissed off with Franco when he basically bombed Guernica and destroyed and basically brought all the arms and munitions. And then Franco says, "No, I'm not going to do that. Here, take a division into Russia. Happy days, but we ain't moving." I think he must have been a tad pissed off.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, but there were Spanish troops, as you say, in Stalingrad, Mark.
Yeah, there were. There was the Blue Division.
Volunteers.
There was Spanish volunteers that fought in the Free French as well.
Yeah.
Lots of them.
But don't forget, the Spanish were just after a major civil war, right?
Yeah.
They were struggling to feed themselves. And they got an awful lot of wheat from Canada.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, but we were giving everybody wheat.
But they were getting it from North America and Canada.
That is a very...
So that would have got cut off.
Dave,
And the Germans didn't want to have to supply the Spanish.
Yeah. And that's a very good point indeed, because yes, who could have supplied the Spanish?
Exactly.
Oh, my thoughts had been that if you look at how I know that Bill was saying that the Azul division, the Blue Division, fought really well, but really would the Spanish contribution not just have been more second or third class divisions like the Hungarians or Romanians, or
I think actually I would disagree there, because I think a lot of them were very experienced, having fought that Spanish Civil War. You had a lot of, the black shirt troops were, or whatever they were, the Carlists and all that. They were very experienced. They were murderous. Well.
It's just how they would have been equipped, and it's the equipment really.
Yeah, equipment. That's a different ball game. But I think the quality of soldiering probably very good. But I think what's more interesting is what you were talking about, the speculation in the Mediterranean, because nothing was going to change the outcome of the effects in Russia. I mean, even if they put a core in there, it wouldn't have made any difference. But when you talk about the Mediterranean and the shift of power in there, that makes a massive difference.
Well, and if the Axis could have had the mouth of the Mediterranean, they already had North Africa at the time, and they were in Morocco at the beginning. And if they had just taken Gibraltar, they could have just blockaded the whole Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Supplies to India would have had to have gone. Well, they were having to go the long way around anyway, but you basically lose access to the Suez Canal. Mm-hmm. All those German troops that they lost in North Africa.
Was that already built, though, the canal?
Yeah, it was there.
I thought it was the Panama Canal that had already been built.
No, the Suez was there.
Yeah.
I'm sure the Suez Canal was.
Suez was built before Panama.
Yeah.
Panama
Well before it was
1914. It was built in the 1870s. Suez?
Yeah, by de Lesseps.
1850s, 1860s, something like that.
Yeah. Well, Disraeli was Prime Minister. So 1850s.
So basically, if you think, because I know Stalingrad's always seen as like one of the big.
1869 it opened.
There you go.
Right.
Stalingrad was a massive loss of German troops and stuff, but so was their surrender in Tunisia and North Africa.
Yeah. All in the same year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more important, like what you were saying, because if Gibraltar falls and you've got the gates to the Med closed, the Italian fleet can be wandering around with impunity. Malta would fall, one way or the other.
Yeah.
But you know what? Short of them
Locked
minefielding the whole thing, they would have blasted through that. The British and the Americans together probably could have just blasted through it.
No,
The Americans weren't in the war. Were they in the war at that stage?
no.
Come straight
No.
in? No.
No.
But I mean, the other side of it was if you think about the Royal Navy's commitments elsewhere, the operations to get the convoys to Malta. I was just reading about it there, and the convoy that got through with the Ohio and stuff, that was 12 merchant ships, 1 tanker, and 72 warships, which included 4 carriers and 4 battleships, and 3 merchant vessels. And the tanker got through, and the tanker was being held up by a destroyer on either side, keeping it afloat. So it would have taken, and that was with the Allies controlling Gibraltar, so it would have taken a hell of a force to get them through.
Which was the, if you've just read it, which was the one that they got massacred? The British fleet, they were trying to relieve Malta, and wasn't it? Do you know which convoy it was, James?
Nah, the book I'm reading doesn't mention the convoy names. It's actually about the pedestal and before.
Yeah, that rings bells.
The book I'm reading is actually about the Beaufort torpedo bomber pilots who were in Malta at the time, taking horrendous casualties as well.
Yeah. Yes, the old Rock of Gibraltar, a critical position.
Yeah.
But I mean, we lost a lot of critical positions. Singapore, Tobruk. The World War II was bloody one of the worst things for the British Army, wasn't it? In its historical record, some of the worst defeats we've ever had. So,
my belief was that if Spain had joined, then you would have extended the war maybe by a year or 2, but the end result would have been that instead of them nuking Nagasaki or Hiroshima, they would have nuked Nuremberg or Berlin.
Yeah.
Well, they would have, but it wasn't finished at the time.
Yeah. Well, you know what I mean. It would have been a Western European target that got nuked rather than a Japanese one initially. The one in Japan would probably have gone on even longer, but eventually the building of the nukes kind of made the whole thing a bit. That's your kind of hard point.
Yeah. I don't know whether they would have dropped nukes in Europe.
Well,
I'm not so sure.
Bear in mind they didn't know the side effects though.
Yeah.
At the time, it was just a massive explosion. They didn't understand radiation or the side effects or anything of it. So I think
the scientists knew, but the military that was going to pull the trigger, they were like, we don't care, we're going to pull it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. But wasn't it the US had to make that decision? And I thought the only reason they were employed was because of the horrendous casualties that they thought that they would suffer if they went in, following Okinawa and all that, if they went into mainland Japan.
Yeah, they figured it'd be a million dead, and in every single war since World War II, they're still handing out the Purple Hearts are still all that were manufactured for the invasion of Japan.
Yeah.
But they also they were worried about Russia, because once Germany was defeated, they didn't want Russia going in and winning that either. So they're like, well, we kind of want to finish that off. Plus, they kind of wanted to know if it would work too. So the 2 that were used in the war were of 2 different designs. One they knew would work for sure, but it took like 2 years to get the uranium together to build it. The other one was a plutonium one. That one they didn't know if it was going to work, but if it did work, they'd be able to make lots per year rather than one every couple of years.
Right. I don't know about any of this, so it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's just how much of a difference that would have made.
Well, I think it could have swung the war in Germany's favour. you know, as you say, if you take out North Africa, the Germans didn't have a huge amount of commitment, did they, in North Africa with Rommel and all of that? But the Italians, I think, supported by someone like Rommel, would have, I think, ultimately, if they controlled the convoys, the British would have been compelled to fall back to Syria and places like that because of the fuel and the ammunition. It changed, and maybe they would have even got the oil fields down in Iraq.
Exactly,
And
which
that
was
changes
what
the
it was all
whole
about.
thing.
That was the whole reason for being in North Africa, anyways.
Exactly, Gary.
To block Suez and go for the oil fields.
A fascinating what if. What a great question.
And I remember having this conversation with Lady Diana.
Oh, Christ. Don't bring Her Royal Highness.
I won't go there. We'll leave that for another night.
Yeah.
I was going to mention a passage to India, but we won't go there either.
No.
The other side of it was as well that if Spain had got involved and the Germans had seen more success in the Med, then would that have encouraged the Turks to join in as well? Would there have been the potential of a domino effect?
Because wasn't that one of the reasons why Churchill threw everything after that? They defeated the Italians, and he then goes to bolster up Greece. But the main reason was basically to keep the Turks in order, I think.
Yeah,
I think it was also. I mean, Churchill was a great classicist, and he had this fascination with Greece.
Yeah,
he wanted to liberate, the centre of classical culture, which I think distracted him quite a few times.
Yes,
there was a strategic advantage. He was brought up on Latin and ancient Greek.
But I think Germans hate Greece for the same reasons, though.
Yeah, but remember his debacle at Gallipoli as well.
Yeah, for the same reasons.
I saw that new Churchill film, not the one. There have been two, and this one was just about D-Day, and and in that it focuses on his being haunted by what happened at Gallipoli, and he doesn't want them to go in. He's terrified that it's going to be another Gallipoli for him. And it was quite good in places. I don't think it was it wasn't as gripping as some films have been. But
is that the one with who was the one who was the actor who played him? Gary Oldman?
No, he's a sort of Scottish, not Scottish guy. Oh Christ, I don't know. I've forgotten his name. But the new one has got Gary Oldman in it.
Yeah.
Sean Connery, yes. We shall go into Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
You guys watch the show The Crown? It's got like John Lithgow as him, and it's really badly cast only because he's like 6'4" and he's towering over the actress who plays Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah.
But the woman who plays Churchill's wife in The Crown is the same actress who plays Churchill's wife in that new movie that's coming out.
All right.
Yeah, I think the whole involvement of Churchill in Greece was pretty dubious as well, because it was all based around an agreement with Stalin over where the zones of control would be and stuff. And you've got British paras on the streets of Greece gunning down Greek civilians and stuff who were protesting about the imposition of another fascist government, because that's who Churchill wanted in charge and stuff. It's all very nasty.
Yeah, and Greece was very divided at the time. They had the communists, they had the liberals, and they also had the fascists as well, all wanting to have control. The royalists, it was a really disjointed country at the time, and was for the next 20 years after that.
That's where Prince Philip was from, wasn't he?
He was born there in an orange box, yeah.
An orange box?
An orange box? And then?
A couple more days till Canadian Nationals. They literally just changed the rules yesterday. After you already had to submit your lists, so I'm screwed. I'm like, way to go, guys. Way to go.
That's why I never submit my list.
Well, your royalty, you would never submit to anything.
That's why he ended up in jail as well.
Well,
Papers, please. No.
If Germans had even lived in his palace for more than a day, he would still have it fumigated.
Well, he was incensed.
And rightly so.
He was incensed in that comic when I came back and said, "You're an acting corporal." You were furious, weren't you?
yeah.
To be honest, he was more annoyed that you gave him a
corporal.
He was more annoyed that you gave him a submachine gun, and the Dutch army didn't have any submachine guns.
I don't know what it was.
And even if they did, somebody had to take the safety cock off for him.
Our crown prince of the time, he did have a submachine gun.
Yeah.
German one. And
Was it made of gold?
Well, gold-plated. He used it to shoot at German planes coming over The Hague. Legend has it he shot down a few.
Yes,
I doubt
a few birds probably.
It's a little known fact that we had the feudal system in Europe, and throughout Normandy, France, Anjou, Le Mans, all right down. They had this. Well, of course, in the Netherlands, they had this.
And I got a bit every third word of that, Gary, because your crows are playing up again.
Yeah, his internet is brought to you by the Ravens from Game of Thrones.
Try again.
Okay, so anyway, it's a little known fact that in Northern Europe, in Normandy and Anjou, they had the serf system, which was a feudal society, whereas in Holland, they had the Smurf system.
Right.
They all had to wear blue hats.
Wow.
That's white hats. Way to get it right.
Yeah, well, that was the leaders, and one of them had a red hat. He was top of the tree. He was Smurf Lord.
Where do you all come from?
From Utrecht, where we come from.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Anyway.
Moving swiftly on.
Very.
Go on,
So we managed to miss at the beginning. We managed to miss what's everybody working on. So what's everybody? I know some of us have already done it, but what's everybody up to?
I'm procrastinating and not doing the decals on my Canadian Nationals list.
Okay.
So not looking at all then.
I was appreciating Stig's video with his tiger and his pictures that he put up. Very nice.
Mm.
Yeah,
I didn't get a chance to see them.
I'd spotted that you had stuck the decals on.
yeah.
But you've got a very beaten up tank there, Steve, and some very fresh paintwork on the decals.
Yeah.
Was the thing that jumped out at me. So I was going to suggest you might want to.
I did it on the King Tiger. I've weathered them a bit. It's just on the other one. You're right. I haven't. Have I? Yeah. I need to do something on them.
Looks fine to me, old Bean.
Oh, it looked fine. It was just a comment that the tank's all scratched and beaten up and the paintwork's on the...
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I'll sort it out. I'm going to do the Panther as well, so while I'm doing that, I'll do the...
What system did you use to put the decals on in the end?
I got some of that. Some Microsol, Microset.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to use.
And it works
That's what
really well.
should
Brilliant stuff.
Do you matte varnish it afterwards?
Yeah.
This is Matt advertising his YouTube channel there. Just thought I'd done that one in there.
Product placement. No, the irony is my handle is
It
matte
doesn't
varnish,
actually. It
and
doesn't
I-
actually
and I never
pair
use it.
Stig. You know, it doesn't pair, mate.
No, I do.
Yeah.
He's a way better painter than me, so of course I'm going to take any tips I can.
I have heard or have read about putting a gloss over the top of the decal before you mat it, because apparently it makes it blend in a bit better. You don't get a kind of pronounced lip where the edge of the decal is if you do that.
I keep
Well, I've
saying
got
to
a
everyone,
decal
don't
medium that
spend
melts
20 quid. Just use some PVA. It does exactly the same thing. It's brilliant.
No, PVA looks bad.
Well, I've used
Maybe
it.
maybe it's North American PVA. It looks horrible.
Does it? Mine's really never had a problem with it. Swear by it.
We do. All right.
Mine looks like mine turns white. for some
White.
reason. Yeah.
Well, mine dries absolutely matte clear. And
Yeah,
you
mine
can't
doesn't.
get them. You can't get them off. It's really good. But I think mine's more the wood glue, so it dries invisible type thing.
Oh, that's what I use as well.
But you're using the Dutch version,
It's
Edzard.
called the Bison Professional, so it must be good.
Cut it with some more.
Now, if you bought it in Thanet, you'd be all right.
Yeah. I swear by Poundland Primer. $1. Great stuff.
You must pay a fortune in postage if it's $1.
Well, whatever.
But bear in mind, you can still buy a house in Sheppey for that.
Yeah. Land
if
of
not,
the free,
if not a street, land of the free.
Wow.
Everything's free. Shall I do my bit then?
Yeah.
I'm doing. I'll just interject there. I'm doing Silesian Uhlans and Austrian artillery guys.
Power gaming.
Yeah,
That'll keep the Landy more happy.
Yeah.
obviously.
Oh, Dave, I found some chasseurs Ardennes with coal packs, and I've just ordered them. So that's going to take me back to the old horse and musket period.
I think that's just the way they
what
walk,
scale?
actually.
The guides, or whatever they were called.
Guide?
A guide.
Yep. The guide?
Yes.
Girl guides?
Go guides. So I'm quite excited about them when they turn up.
What, the girl guides?
What scale are they in?
15. 15 mil. Yeah, I think in World War One, there's a lot of cavalry in World War One. Of course, the Belgians still had cavalry, so did the Dutch. So we like to
for 2 weeks.
Yeah, our cavalry didn't do much in World War One.
No, I think
We were neutral.
Or two.
Parades and directing traffic.
Capturing deserters who crossed the lines. The border.
Exactly, yeah.
Waving those V2s into the air.
Wasn't Matahari Dutch?
Yeah, she was, yeah.
That's a very Dutch sounding name, not.
Wasn't a real name, though.
No, probably not.
Which I'm sure Edzard will tell us what her real name is. Once he's quickly.
Once I've Googled it. I think
hang on a minute, guys. For sure, I know. Yes, for sure. Yeah, Matahari, yeah, for sure. She's,
it must be Margaretha Geertruida.
The shelter, this.
Yeah. The Wikipedia is pretty extensive.
Any minute now.
There's a raven coming in.
Yeah. What's Dutch for in your own time?
I just gave you the name.
He was talking over you, didn't hear you.
Yeah, Margaretha Geertruida Zelle.
Gesundheit.
Yeah, that's what I thought you said.
That's the one.
That's what I thought you said, yeah.
Fusiliers for high treason and spying.
It's easy for you to say.
She was a Dutch exotic dancer.
The best kind.
Yeah.
I love the Dutch girls. They're fantastic.
Anyway. Anyway.
Well, the second
I
best
know
kind
I
is called
started
Dykes, so.
Who is next? Dave, we've not seen you for a few days. What are you up to?
So I'm doing some 10 mil ACW to crack on with it, given I've now booked a table for a game at the show in November. So.
Oh, speaking of, sorry to interrupt. The show Colors in Newbury. Any of you guys going to that?
Yeah, too far away.
Too far south. Yeah.
No, my buddy who's posted in Israel, he has some training to do in the UK, so he's like, "Oh, I looked up that here's a show that's going on, so he's going to be there."
It used to be quite a good show.
When is it?
It's mid-September.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's close enough for me
somewhere
to
else.
go up there.
It used to be at Derby, didn't it? And they've moved it this year to Newbury. I think.
Was it Reading?
Yeah, Reading's usually what
Reading.
I'm
You mean reading?
No. Unsubscribe.
Yeah.
Well, way to
Mark,
go,
I can't
guys.
deal with these people.
You-
Please tell him.
You
Mark.
have a word. You have a word that's pronounced read, but then you have it not reading, but it's reading.
Now you feel my pain with all these stupid, unpronounceable names.
Well, if you don't
Wait.
if you don't understand it, it's just Tau.
I guess.
Mark,
Yes.
tell him about the Anglo-Saxon history of the word Reading, as in the town.
To be honest, I don't know that one. I don't
Right,
know
okay.
at all.
Well,
You go for
Ingas means people.
Yeah.
So it's the
And
people
village.
of the.
It also means village as well. Inga.
It does mean, yeah. It's the town of the people called Reda.
Yeah.
So it's Red-ing. It's the people who followed the leader Red.
Yeah.
Okay, which means learned, which means a bloke who was quite clever decided to settle down there and form a university.
So he was
Many
well
years
read.
later. Yeah.
Were they the ones that found the king, Richard? Was it Reading?
Yeah,
No,
and
that
I
wasn't-
remember talking to Lady Diana about this very subject
Really?
many years ago.
Were you talking to her as you were being smuggled into Buckingham Palace in the trunk of a car?
No, it was the tradesman's interest, actually, but there you go. But we won't go into that one tonight.
No, we won't.
No, we will not.
Outrageous on her birthday.
On her birthday, God bless her.
On her birthday.
On her birthday. Well, she did say to me, I think it's my birthday, but there you go.
So yes, I'm painting 10mm SCW.
Right, thank you. Back to sanity.
Thank you.
Sanity.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
Back to
How
sanity.
casual season.
What
Broken
show
down.
did you? And what show did you book a table at?
Battleground. It's end of November. It's in
All
Stockton on Team.
Be
Chaps along for a game.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, was the his table from Partisan in the paper mag of War Games Illustrated? Do we know?
Mine was, yeah.
Was that in the paper copy? Because I know it was in the interactive one.
I keep trying to find it.
I think it's in the print version as well.
Right.
No, it's cool. Just because my crappy local game store is about to get his copies in, months later.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's the War Game. Yeah, the War Game. This month's War Games Illustrated ones. I think's got it in.
War Games
But that was-
Illustrated.
That was from May's show.
Yeah.
Because it was in Miniature War Games last month or the month before. Yes, they were there. So.
Yeah, I think the interactive one had a link to the video of the
Yeah.
3D bird's eye view, which I shared on the Facebook group, I think.
Yeah, there's quite a good overall video of it as well from May. So
Well done. It
Mm.
was a smashing looking table and Glad to see you got the recognition.
It's all bums on seats, laddies. Bums on seats.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it would have gone much better when I was playing if I hadn't left command to Martin for short periods of time.
Oh, the blame game starts already.
It was Martin's face after you'd matched the Scots Guards out of the Zareba.
I know.
He came back from a shopping expedition to find 2 companies in the middle of the desert.
Nice.
Paid off, though.
Yeah. Indeed. Yeah, that's good. So I'm sort of planning a very big game of that on a 28-foot table.
I was going to say, how much bigger can you get? Because that was a fairly massive
28
one.
feet. Go on. With the city in the middle.
For your
the city in the middle, and then two 12 by 6s at either end, with 2 imperial columns. March.
For your Arabs,
and the idea is that the imperial commanders at one end play the Mahdists at the other, and vice versa. So who can get to the city first is the plan for that one. So it'll come along.
What were you going to say there, Dennis?
I was going to say your Mahdists. I've gotten in a trade a bunch of, and they may or may not work, but I literally have no use for them. The Muhatatwa from Saga. Could you find a use for those?
Oh, I can always find uses for things.
Don't encourage him. He's been saying that project's just about finished all the time that I've known him.
Yeah, it needs another winter season.
He's been saying that all the time I've known him as well.
Yeah, it's true. It needs another winter season. To finish all the Egyptians and the Sudanese and the Egyptian Camel Corps and the steamers and the Canadian Voyageurs and stuff, you know.
Voyageurs, jeez.
Yeah. Yes, they brought in Canadian people who were experienced in the use of small boats, and they brought those in to pilot them down the Nile. So
that's unbelievable. I've never heard of that.
Yeah. It was one of the first Canadian deployments abroad as well.
I was going to say, yeah. We were a newly minted country at that point. Mm-hmm. Well, we're still really a dominion. Basically, we did whatever the UK told us to do.
As it should be, dear boy.
As does Scotland still does now. Yeah. So.
Oh, wow.
Unsubscribe.
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 Yeah, unsubscribe.
That was one of the Australian. It was the Australians' first deployment as well. Well, they weren't the Australians. It was the New South Wales contingent. It was their first one as well in the Sudan.
Oh, that was a battery that Martin got killed.
Yeah, that was the battery that Martin got killed. Yeah. Absolutely mullered.
Yeah, terrible. Wouldn't have happened on my watch. Excuse me, guys. Mark, what are you working on?
Sorry. Was that me?
If he doesn't answer within 2 minutes, I'm going to start telling my Princess Michael of Kent story.
Right. Okay. Belgian forces defending their homeland to the bitter end. World War II.
Yeah, so a 2-minute battle there.
Chateau Ardennes. And so a complete army, which no one really does. I think in the Flames of War type systems, I think other people do. Very interesting.
I've seen a Belgian at last year's Canadian Nationals. Somebody had the Belgians.
Oh, good.
He was of Belgian descent, so we dubbed it the Chocolate and French Fries Brigade.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Most interesting.
The Battalion Biscotte.
I've also built I built for Fort Baptiste and the main building and a sort of barrack exit block from the photograph. So hopefully I've got all the main features for that game, which comes up on Friday. So it should look quite good. I'm hoping.
So these are the Batty's boys?
These are the Batty boys.
Yeah, okay.
No, Chasses Ardennes are not at this. It's just regular Belgian infantry against hordes of German infantry, which will hopefully be mown down.
Yeah,
basically.
And rightly so.
And rightly
we apologise to all German viewers this evening.
Yes.
Unsubscribe. Right. It's nothing personal.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it basically.
But can Edzard have his bicycle back, please?
No.
9.
It's been captured.
Sorry, could the Prince of Utrecht have his bicycle back, please?
Edzard, do you fancy playing the Queen of the Netherlands in one of the games?
He always plays the Queen of the Netherlands at the weekends, as you well know, Mark.
I thought that was the name of the club.
No, it is. He's off to play the Queen of the Netherlands.
Yeah.
This evening.
Yes.
I'm nothing special. In fact, I'm a bit of a bore.
You do that real well, Gary.
I've seen his act. I've seen his act.
Oh, have you?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do on Thursday nights? Is it down that club then, Gary, for you? We've all got to make
I've been touched by his feather boa, don't worry.
He goes there so often they've asked him to be honorary bouncer. If you know what I mean.
It's when he does his Lily Marlene out impression, you need to worry.
I don't need the backstage pass. They just wave me straight in.
Yeah. Hello, Gary.
Back again.
Those heels must be killing you.
Not as much as they'll be killing you, darling, in 3 seconds if you carry on with that routine.
Good thing we're not live because it would be unsubscribes all around.
Unsubscribe.
Unfortunately, we are live.
I know exactly we are.
Cool. Perfect.
What do you think Edzard did the runner?
Yes.
In his slingbacks.
He's still on bail, isn't he? So
yeah.
So where had we got to? Mark, did you tell us what you were working on?
Oh yeah, I did the full Baptiste and all that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Who else have we got? That's it, I think, isn't it? Everybody's had a go. Steve?
Yeah, I'm cleaning up my late war British that I'm going to be using as my Canadians.
Well done.
Just finished cleaning them all up. Get them undercoated tonight. Start painting tomorrow, hopefully.
Good stuff.
Unless I get distracted by doing.
It's sad that seemingly everybody in this group has Canadians of some sort except me, and I'm the Canadian.
And me. No Canadians at all to speak of.
Dave's got voyageurs, for crying out loud. He's got French Canadians in Egypt.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which I'm so shocked at.
Paddling bloody canoes up the Nile.
Yeah, no beavers there.
No. Well,
I'm sure there's some jokes.
Depends how you look at it.
I didn't realize you guys knew that joke or knew the term. There you go. I thought it was a Canada only thing.
Mark,
Yes.
Tell him.
Yes, dear boy.
Come on, you're on.
What have I got to do? Okay. I think a new topic for discussion.
Right. Stay away from the beaver.
Yes, I will.
Well, that's a topic in its own right, isn't it?
It is.
something that I was quite interested in the other day was basically, obviously, with North Korea doing whatever it's doing at the moment, and I'm still unclear because I don't really listen to the news. But it was quite interesting. I saw an article about the ancient civilizations of China and all of that, and whether they're going to continue digging the big tomb, in China. And there's a lot of controversy going on about that because they think that the place is absolutely, they've only, like a bit like Pompeii, they've only sort of uncovered a 100th of it, where the terracotta army is. And it appears that there's looters all over the place, and they've got, barrows or holes being dug everywhere. So it's quite interesting, really, because obviously that tomb will contain so much information all about those cultures. I mean, they're very well documented anyway. But
well, didn't they only just find them in the 70s?
Yeah, but I mean, it's a massive complex. I mean, it's massive. I mean, you can't. They say in for instance, in Egypt, including the monuments that we've got, the Sphinx, the pyramids, we've only got a 10th of the Egyptian archaeology. So where's the other 90%? That's how big.
Under the sand.
That's how big.
Or already destroyed.
Are. Yeah, and we don't know nothing really about the past, and there's so much speculation, and history is written by the victor, as we know. But it was just interesting for me, about even World War II, even World War One, how much stuff's being eroded out, robbed out, and it's critical evidence which is going missing.
Yeah, but I mean, you're touching on the Egyptian thing there. That American professor is using satellite photography to discover all these undiscovered sites in Egypt, and she's you say there's 10%. She's discovered maybe 30%, and she's still sending satellite photography over there. But she was the one who found that new Viking site in Lancer Meadows.
Yeah.
Last 2 years.
It's very well known. It's very well known the Vikings were all over that coastline, and it's a misnomer. And the evidence seems to suggest, quite frankly, that when was it the Aztecs or the Incas? I can never remember which one it was. The legend of Quetzalcoatl, the yellow-bearded god. It's very likely that it was Norse. I mean, there's.
Well, yeah. Why would those ships have gone south? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, these guys were very incredible seamen, weren't they? I mean,
I shall be back shortly. Now Mark's off on there.
Oh, right, okay.
This one, which is a good one. No. Carry on, mate. Carry on.
So, it begs the question about which I was thinking about is whether or not now people are collecting artifacts. Or souvenirs, and I've raised this issue before, especially in modern conflicts. If you start metal detecting and taking a whole load of stuff out of the context, you are ultimately destroying a lot of that context, and so you can't really discern much, when you go to actually investigate it. And this is part of the problem with robbery that's been going on throughout. A lot of the story is stolen for the pursuit of valuables and collectibles. So it just sort of reminded me of my old past, and I just thought it's sad as well as interesting, But there you go.
Well, you just have to look at the impact of that sort of behaviour on the battlefield archaeology and stuff. You've got these guys in Russia and in Belgium and France and stuff who are literally finding bodies, ignoring the bones, and stealing any metal objects or any value deemed items of value off of the remains in order to sell, without any thought as to the effect that'll have on the ability to identify an individual.
Yeah, I mean, there are some very good guys out there. There are some unscrupulous guys. There's no two ways about that. But yeah, I mean, when you're disturbing war graves and things like that, I mean, it is. I mean, I see these videos. I'm sure we've all seen them, especially as you say in Russia and places like that. I don't know how well it's monitored or how you can, but people seem to be
monitored in Russia. I doubt they don't monitor that stuff.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, they're still digging up thousands of bones in Stalingrad. I mean, it's just never ending. I knew from some of the work I was doing, even in Berlin, the amount of unexploded bombs that they come across in construction every day. It's quite staggering. So the legacy is there. The issue, as James quite rightly pointed out, is once you start getting into places like Flanders or anywhere where that nation has an interest in missing in action people and things like that, someone rummaging and just shoving spades through the ground to get to a machine gun or something that they can sell.
Cap badge.
It's a very, very difficult.
I don't like it for the sell. I'm fine with it if it's it's some archaeological society and it's for the recovering of blah blah blah. I'm down for that, but not treasure hunters basically.
No.
I recall seeing a thing in National Geographic in I want to say it's Burma or Vietnam. There's like I think it's called the Montagnards, like a tribe of very backwards natives, but they're living in the hills of Vietnam and Burma, and the American jets would always drop their fuel tanks if they were attacked by the North Vietnamese, and the fuel tanks, when split in two, made perfect boats. And so they would take outboard motors and attach it to half. So there's this picture of this little village, it's all on stilts in the water, and all their little motor boats or whatever are all from F-105 fuel tanks that were jettisoned and were found and hauled over there and made into boats. Just the weirdest little thing.
Yeah, and you know what? There was a culture. I think I can't remember. It's like a cargo cult where they had never been contacted by civilization, but aircraft used to crash in the jungles and stuff. And they used to view our society, the modern society, as gods, and they would take all these bits and pieces. And there were many cases where
there's pictures of a Huey with arrows sticking out of the tail because they flew low over the Montagnard things and they shot bows and arrows at it.
Yeah.
like what?
Yeah. Oh, there you go. We don't have we sometimes forget there are other civilizations and societies. Not many, I grant you, anymore, but they live very much distant from Western culture, and they have their own source of origin, myth and history, and we seem to sort of intercede. I think again in South America, when the Spaniards arrived, it was smallpox and things like that which killed thousands and thousands of these people, because they, especially in the Amazon and places like that, because they had no immunity to it. And you don't, sometimes these unfortunate incidents in contact can lead to real horror stories, I can tell you.
Well, it wasn't necessarily unfortunate, though, was it? The Spaniards deliberately gave smallpox infected blankets and stuff to the...
I don't know. I can't comment on that. I really don't know. I only know.
Yeah, I think that's urban.
I only know that smallpox did, however it was distributed. I don't know. I can't answer that. But yeah, I mean, they did kill a lot of people, however it was done.
I just read an article today, actually, and it was some university somewhere had deciphered a stone tablet that was from that neck of the woods. I can't remember the name. Might have been the Mayans rather than the Aztecs or anything.
Yeah.
And it was they've discovered that it's actually, this stone tablet is actually a trigonometry table. Yeah, but apparently they did trigonometry wasn't officially, or wasn't supposed to have been discovered until the Greeks discovered it. And all our modern maths is based on that basis. But apparently this, whatever it was they found, it does trigonometry, but it's a different way, and they reckon that it might actually be a simpler and quicker method than the methods that we currently use.
Yeah, there's a binary math system where you write everything in binary. I can't remember who did that mathematically, but I saw a wonderful video on it explaining how you can do multiplication using this system. This professor, brilliant, but we're not taught it like that in the schools. But you know, it was really insightful because you can see how the computers and everything formulated their mathematical calculations, but it's not done the way we're taught it, that's for sure. And of course you've got that whole issue, haven't you, of when you look at isolated, this is what becomes quite fascinating when you're exploring culture. If you've got societies that are emerging, right, isolated from one another, and you know, they will develop at different rates in some cases. You know, like in Africa, the Iron Age came very, very late to Africa. It was much earlier elsewhere around the world, but it still follows the same sort of principles in terms of that it's imbued with some sort of magic or some incredible feats across those cultures. And then you get diffusional theory, where you get stuff that's basically migrating the concepts of mounds and, you know, big buildings to house these chiefs, you know, turning into ziggurats and then pyramids and things like that. It's really quite fascinating. But again, I still say that we don't know enough. We can posit all these sort of hypotheses till the cows come home, but we're just lacking so much information, especially about the origins of humanity. You know, there's huge, excuse my French, there's huge gaps across our sort of chronology about the development of humans, you know, because we just can't find the evidence. It's either gone or we haven't located it, you know. It's a very interesting subject, but it's full of a lot of speculation at the end of the day.
Yeah. Just to tie that in slightly to my area of interest, there's going back to the you know, what do you do with this archaeology? Do you leave it in the ground until, you know, we have maybe better technology that can non-destructively analyze it, or do you dig it up and see what you can do with it?
Well, that's what you're supposed to do, James. Absolutely right. You're not supposed to dig anything up if you've got the resources, because once you dig it, you can't re-dig it again. That's the key.
Yeah, and there have been some advances in that. I saw recently a bit of kit that it was basically like a big vacuum, and rather than digging, it just sucks the soil up. So it's a lot less likely to damage things. But stuff like that, you know, better scanning, all that type of thing. But the other side of that is where you've got, like, my visit to the Tank Museum this year, where they've got these bits of kit. They've got Tigers and Shermans and all this sort of stuff. Or the Battle of Britain flight, where they've got Lancasters and Hurricanes and Spitfires. And there's a kind of argument there of, like, should we be actually using these things? Because the more you use them, the more likely they are to break down, and they're not going to last forever. But if you don't use them, then they just end up being...
Well, look at the Vulcan.
Yeah.
Look at the Vulcan that they put in the air until the last Avon engines were out of hours. I still think it was a good thing to fly that thing around rather than have it sit in a museum. And then now it's sitting in a museum again.
Yeah.
But they flew it around, it did barrel rolls and whatever.
Yeah, but is it... You know, was it right to do that now while the aircraft was still within living memory, or would it have been better to have left it until years down the line when...
I guess it depends on who owns it. For example, what about the privately owned Messerschmitt 262? That he fixed it up. He paid all the money to fix it up. It's the only flying one left. But it's not 100% legit because the engines are obviously not the old.
And that's the crux of the matter. It's not 100% legit. Whereas the Tiger or the Lancaster or whatever is, because they've still got the original engines. So at what point does it continue to have historic worth? Because anybody could build a 262 and stick different engines in it.
Well, no, they put different engines in it only for safety, because the original was horrible.
Yeah. I understand that, but my point is that, you know, if you had enough money and enough resources, then anybody could build a Spitfire. You could even build a Spitfire to the exact specifications and the exact blueprints that the original Spitfire was built to. But does that make it an item of historic significance? Because it's a replica, and it's the same with the 262, and the same.
I think you're just splitting hairs at that point. Like, you know what I mean? Like if the public can see it and enjoy it and learn from it, then I'm okay with like not all the parts being legit. Like, you know, in the States they have the same issue with the B-29s. They just got the second flyable B-29 up in the air this year.
Well, what you're talking about, guys, is the issue of restoration and heritage and you know, the validation of it. But if you the answer to both your problems is probably reflected quite well in what they do nowadays. If you go to some of the ancient sites of the world, you'll see they've repaired them. They have to restore these things because you've got the old adage, we've got tourist damage, we've got weather damage. What are we going to do? Are we going to let the thing fall down, or are we going to repair it in situ and protect it? So ultimately what they now do, and you'll see this on a lot of buildings and things, they will use like reinforced modern concrete or whatever, but they will mark it a different color. And that will indicate to you as you go round that this is not original, but it's there basically to keep the damn thing up. And I think it could be said the same thing about your aircraft dilemma. Obviously, a complete rebuild, as you said, Matt, is a very useful tool in education and all of that. But is it an artifact? And the answer is no, because it was not built of that period. An artifact obviously can be anything, really. You know, archaeology is just rubbish, basically. It's what's left over in some cases. And, you know, I say that they both got equal merit. But the thing is, if you want to play it purely, then you'd shut everything up and preserve it, wouldn't you, for eternity? But you then wouldn't get the visibility on it, because you're not going to let people walk all over wings and, you know, touch things, because their greasy fingers, you know, will just erode the canvas on a hurricane, or, you know, it just wear it out. So, yeah, I think the way things are done now, and I think if you go to museums, there's a lot of visual, isn't there? There's a lot of these interactive and get a feel for it and virtual. I think that's the way they're dealing with the problem, you know. But don't go back to the Elgin marbles, mate, because Greece still want those back for the British Museum. That's another issue. You know, should that ME-262 and all those Tiger tanks go back to Germany? Because they are German. They're not British. They're spoils of war, aren't they? There's a whole issue here, which is very, very difficult. And I've alluded to it in some of my videos. You know, you rescue a Heinkel, you pull it out of the water, you refix it. But who does it actually belong to? The Salvor? Probably, legally, yeah. But should it, you know, if the Germans in 50 years said, we want all our Heinkels back because they were our aircraft, they were our aircrew that died, we want to put them in our museums, you've got a huge problem, haven't you?
Yeah.
It's
in a lot of cases, they'll make deals, though. Like, I know, like our museum here, we have a deal with different museums where we have a Panther, we have a T-72, we've got a whole bunch of things, and they have stuff of ours.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, so that our museum isn't all just, oh, well, here's the stuff that Canada had. We have some American stuff, some British stuff, some Russian stuff, some German stuff, that little Italian tankette.
Yeah.
You know, shit like that. Although we did say we wanted to keep the last land mattress, we decided we aren't giving that one away.
Yeah. That discussion was one of the things that was spoken about at one of the tours at the Tank Museum. It was basically, you know, what do you run this thing until it no longer works, and then at which point it becomes a museum exhibit only, or do you do you use it? Because at the end of the day, there's arguments both sides that, well, you know, a vehicle is built to be driven.
I would use it, and then when it's done, and then it becomes static, which is what they do with aircraft.
Yeah, but it's as important as the guy who actually drove the damn thing, who then gives you a first-party conversation about how he drove one to Berlin, or drove one to Arnhem, or drove one to, you know, the crossing of the Ruhr.
Yeah,
you know, I'd rather have the first-party conversation with the guy who actually drove the damn thing or used it.
Yeah,
and used it in action.
The other side of it is as well, look at, you know, World War II, restored World War II aircraft, restored Cold War jets and stuff. Accidents happen, and, you know, these things end up in a smoking crater in the ground, or can end up in a smoking crater in the ground, and then it's totally lost. So is it worth? Is the risk of flying them about?
I think if it's like the last one, then no. But like, for example, in the United States, P-51s, there were gajillions of them afterwards. Like you could, for example, there was my grandfather, my dad's side, he bought Cansos, which are the Canadian version of the PBY Catalina. He bought them for $800. And that's with a full tank of gas. And he reckoned the full tank of gas cost more than $800. Like, they're all surplus. So people were just buying them for nothing, basically. And then, you know, 7 years later, like in Canada, there's only 3 or 4 left that fly. And yet there's a guy, his father bought from the Royal Canadian Air Force spare A-20s. And to this day, he still flies them. Agricultural spray. And those things should be in a museum, but aren't. There's another company in Canada that flies the only Martin Mars left, bought from the U.S. Navy, and the U.S. Navy wants it back. And he's like, well, no. It's mine. You can't have it back.
That's the point I'm trying to make. Ownership.
Yeah.
You know, who owns history? The person who conquered it, you know, or, you know, and you get, this is the thing, I don't think obviously a lot of people do now, but they couldn't quite understand, you know, why the British Museum maintains its position, or, you know, because if they start to say, well, I know we looted this from Assyria, but if we give it back, it's going to open the floodgates for everything. And you're going to suddenly find that all those things that you've got, which you're trying to protect and preserve, I mean, one of the arguments about the Elgin marbles is obviously if they go back to Greece, in the pollution and all of that, they're going to be eroded and destroyed. It may be
but you guys took it from them. You know what I mean? Like, you guys really did. You took it from them during your imperial days.
Same as Napoleon stole loads of stuff from Egypt as well.
Yeah, and I know.
And Italy.
Well, you've also got the issue that the guy who actually took it, I think the Turks were firing at the place, weren't they, using it as target practice?
Yeah, and they used it as ammunition. Yeah.
Yeah, and Lord Elgin said,
and it blew the roof off the Parthenon.
I'll buy this or whatever. I can't remember how it was done. And he took it out. Of course, it's considered one of the world's most precious pieces of art, isn't it? And, you know, again, these sort of issues we don't see when, you know, when you're off looting, you're not considering that sort of factor, are you? You're out there to get your treasure and whatever. But
no, I mean the point I'm trying to make is that is a first party or a first primary source of somebody who was there flying the Spitfire, you know, looting the stuff in Germany, liberating Belsen. Is that more important than an artifact? And I think the testimony is more important. Because that puts it in perspective.
There are I totally agree with you, but there are big problems with oral history, massive problems. You know, because when you're taking an oral history statement, you could be taking it from someone who it's 20 years since that event occurred, let's say.
Yeah.
Their memory may be a little bit fragile, or they, you know, some people want to elaborate their own self-importance or hide what they really did, or it's never as easy. I mean, this is the problem that what you're taught when you're doing anthropology and archaeology, and why I find the whole thing so ridiculous at times when people.
And I find this interesting, Mark, because you're an archaeologist.
Yeah, well, I
really.
was, but
and you were, but you're talking about history in general.
Yeah,
which is great. You know, I like all that.
Yeah, because I think, well, the thing is, as Matt's picked up, as James has picked up, quite eruditely, if I might say, these are very complex issues, and you don't really see. I don't think any of us saw any of the ramifications of this in the 1960s. No one really saw what was coming, and of course, if you go back to the tribal Indians, and I think this all really starts to kick off with the Aborigines and with the Native American people, who are starting to say, hang on a second, you know, these are our lands, these are our artifacts, we want them back, they belong to our nation. And all of these battles that were going on, especially in South Australia, of course, they discovered uranium. Now, you can imagine, this is right in the middle of a Aboriginal area. Now, the big problem there in that one was how many Aboriginal areas? Because every tribe, you know, was sort of nomadic and moved around, and all of these tribes claimed some sort of heritage to this land, and it was a nightmare. I still don't. I think it's probably ongoing. You know, who actually owns the bit of land? You know, again, and all you've got is oral testimony, and you've got maybe rock art or some artifacts or something. It's an impossible decision to make, and it could have serious ramifications. You know, if you get it wrong, people are very. That's why I'm really passionate about what I try and say about World War II is that when people start to pollute the past, and I say this from a gaming point of view, and I'll make this point once, but it's a very important point to me, and that is when people are playing games, okay, and they are playing games which aren't, in my opinion, especially with the generation, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to anybody here, but I am a teacher and I have seen a lot of the young people. They don't tend to want to read the history books. They don't tend to want to get that involved. They want to play the game, but they perhaps don't want to really understand the history and the context of it. And because of that, when games start to allow ridiculous things, in my opinion, to happen, and I know I'm being an old fogey here, but I see the ramifications of this in 10 years. And the ramifications are, oh, what? Panthers attacked the Japanese, did they? And people are going to believe it. They're going to believe that because they won't have read the books or picked the books up and not realise that perhaps the Japanese and Germans were allied. These sort of small things, even in wargaming, I know it may seem strange, but I've been thinking about it over the last 6 months. What are the ramifications of how we represent games and war games? Are we conscious of the narratives that we're creating when we make these games? You know, I know it seems a bit weird and a wacky sort of thing to say.
No, it's not at all. It's what do children these days know about history?
Yeah,
what do they know about what follows what?
Yeah. So as war gamers, which I think we all are sitting around this table, do we, as you know, when Dave is ardently battling on for the Sudan, he's trying to indirectly and subliminally tell a truer narrative, a narrative that draws someone in and makes them look at factors like Matt discovered tonight about the Canadian canoe men or whatever they were. You know, he wasn't aware of it. I wasn't aware of it, but because he's done the research. So again, if you start putting a false narrative out there, that's what worries me, and perhaps why, you know, when I've sort of challenged what's going on in Flames of War and things like that, I'm seeing it from a very different perspective than from purely the commercial. I'm looking at it from the historical, and you know, it's difficult because I can see there's going to be a problem here. Not now, because we're just all having fun, but in 10 years' time, and there could be a distorted narrative because of this.
But wouldn't they have thought of the same thing in like the 60s? They're like, oh, you know, these kids today, that was 15 years ago. And I mean, I'd wager that we're more educated now, because back then, in the United States especially, it was only about how America kicked so much ass and everything was America, 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 America. And I'd argue that in some cases we have better knowledge now than they did right at the end of the war.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but I'm trying to spin this onto the narrative that I've been saying about the archaeology and how we missed the elephant in the room when we removed those artifacts. And no one knew what the ramifications of that were until we now look at it today. When James makes the point, someone with a metal detector digging a hole, you know, in the back of Russia, uncovers a body and just discards it. There's an effect there. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. I'm just saying there's an issue there, and I don't know whether one should be thinking about it now. But if I've
the Egyptian grave robbers were doing that in 2000 BC, so it's been going on quite a while,
and they still do.
Yeah,
they still do.
And that's the point. The point is, I think I'm trying to say you've got to be careful about how I think we represent things and articulate things, and sometimes I think we forget that, you know, because we are dealing with history, and history it defines who we are. It defines where we come from. And as you've said to me before, Matt, you become very frustrated as well when the narrative is driven purely from an American perspective.
it's brutal over here,
yeah. And it's the same here. I'm sure the Irish and the Scots and the Welsh are fed up to their eye teeth hearing stuff about that, because what we're seeing is a change in the polemic and the political situation, and people are becoming a bit more nationalist now, and they want their identities back. And we see that through Europe sort of fracturing a bit. Maybe, you know, all of us coming together, which was probably perceived as a good idea, isn't the best idea, because people have still got national identities, and they're resisting change. And they're, I don't know, subliminally. And it's too complex a flipping issue. For bloody hell, what are we doing talking about this stuff? I've blown my mind apart.
Just go play Minecraft.
Unsubscribe.
Unsubscribe.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's food for thought. Matt, what are your thoughts then on it? I mean, you're saying that you think the younger generation are more enlightened.
Well, potentially. Don't know.
I don't think so. But at the same time, I think that
ran more to hand than we did. We had to read a book, for Christ's sake. I think they've got it all online.
But my point to that would be, or the other side of that for me would be that I've got books here on the shelf about the operation I'm interested in, which have been written by guys who are substantially older than me, who were probably brought up in the 50s and 60s and 70s when the war was much newer. There's mistakes in those books.
Yeah.
There's errors in them. Yeah, I mean, it's not just from an oral history, or not just the oral history of it, but the actual information that's held in those books. I've discovered errors in it through my own research.
Yeah.
So it's not just something that comes about because of, you know, how we play a game or anything. It's something that comes about how Hollywood represent the conflict, about how it appears on popular television, about the sources that we're using actually being wrong. You know, and that's just a snowball effect that's going to eventually lead to this stuff. Our knowledge of what happened to be debased. It's just an issue of how fast that happens, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that we're sitting here, four of us, talking about something. We're all passionate about history, and you know, we go back to the archaeology as I sort of mooted for this topic. You know, what the lessons that I learned from that are making me think slightly differently, I suppose, now about what I'm trying to do, because I have massive bias. The first thing you're taught in any archaeology or any social investigation is bias. It is the one thing, you know, that is endemic through everything. Everyone has a particular bias or a worldview. Trying to eradicate your own bias is extremely difficult. And so any narrative...
Yeah, but you're taught not to have the bias, Mark.
Yeah, but that's...
You're taught to be objective.
Again, that's like trying to climb a mountain full of sugar, isn't it? I mean, you
And
can't
there will always be bias. I think that's the point
no
you're trying to make.
how
There will always be bias. You cannot be unbiased.
No, I mean, as I say in some of my reports, it is all Germany's way at the moment because I'm trying to simulate it. But we are trying to put things on that sort of reflect the lesson age. I am trying to, I don't know, maybe I'm going to put about this in completely the wrong way. I have no idea what I'm doing really. But I am thinking about these issues. I'm conscious of them, which sounds a bit bizarre, but I am quite conscious of what I say. And it's very difficult because of the way I was trained as well. You know, like when you just said to me the Dutch didn't have SMGs, I thought, oh shit, well I should have known that, but I can't know everything. No. And that's another issue that you know, do you generalize and therefore become too reductive? Do you go too deep and therefore miss the points you're trying to make? It's quite hard. It's quite hard in whatever we do, how we represent things, and sometimes it's best just to pick the fucking dice. Excuse me, pick the French dice up and chuck them across the room.
But to be fair, I didn't know that the Dutch didn't have SMGs. It was Edzard that told me that they didn't. So,
well, I didn't know that.
No.
Well, SMGs were kind of a new invention at that point, weren't they?
Well, they had them during the First World War, but they were still relatively new tech.
I think I don't know. I'm not trying to defend my position. I didn't even think about it, to be brutally honest. I assumed, and again, that's a massive mistake to make, but I can't check every fact. And I'd seen pictures of, admittedly, nearly all the Dutch I've seen have been armed with rifles. I don't think I recall seeing a photograph with any SMGs, so I will issue a formal correction on that. But,
only the Dutch royal family had them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had somebody to fire them for them.
Yeah, well, I'll just justify that.
Edzard will probably tell you.
Edzard was the bastard prince or something. Perhaps that will solve the problem at Maastricht. You know, and that can correct all of those errors. But again, it's, you know, the thing is, whatever we do, however we look at it, we're not going to be aware of the impact we're going to have in 10 years, are we? We can't be. But I think from the lessons I've learned, I'm trying to encourage wargaming again and try and get people to look a little bit more closely at history. That's all I can really do, and try and showcase different things within World War II. That's all I'm trying to do, and try and get people to explore the narrative and not think of it as just a narrative that is in stone now that we shouldn't challenge, because we should challenge it.
Yeah, there is a really interesting correlation there about what you're saying about the, you use the medium of your hobby to try and help with the teaching or the grasp or the passing on of the historical context.
Yeah.
There is a really interesting correlation there between things like my ongoing project, which at some point, if I get a decent sized table laid out and put everything on it, is going to look fucking impressive.
Yeah.
Just purely from the sheer quantity of stuff, and Dave's game is very much the same. The quantity, the quality's there, but it's when you see the table filled with the Imperial troops and Madras and stuff, and that's where people kind of switch on to, all right, so what exactly was the background there? What was happening?
The thing is, James, you're struggling with something. You're struggling with the fact that you're actually a wargamer.
No, I don't know that I struggle with it. I'm quite happy with it.
No. What I mean is because you play games as well, and I think what I love about you, in some ways, is it underscored the amount of research and knowledge you have at your fingertips now, based on what you have. I think it's so important to share. I think it's vitally important to share. And if the game as a medium is a way to do that, I think that's an incredibly good thing, as Dave does in the Sudan. It gets people, as you say, that visual thing connects you. You then go in and ask the question, as you've just said, and that leads to maybe you going off and picking up a book, and going, well, I didn't know
or
that.
reading a wiki article.
Yeah. But I it's like I love what you're doing, because I think the attention to detail you've done is just so It's what it's about, you know, because that's going to be your project, and you know, when you showcase that, I think it may be like a lot of my work, I'm sure, lost on people, or they don't like it for whatever it is. But you know, at the end of the day, you've at least tried to do something with your hobby in an educational sense, which I suppose I'm now very much biased by because I'm driven by it. But I've always been interested in history, and I can't, because I'm teaching maths at the moment. I can't really.
Jesus.
Exactly, that's bad, isn't it?
That is bad.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's the tough times, Gary. Tough times.
Must be.
Calls for the right people, and I'm not that man. But you know, I can't.
I think out of all of that, I think we've reached the point where we've got enough figures to play with.
Yeah.
Now we're just doing it for pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we spend a lot more time on doing stuff now because we want to improve on what we've done before.
Yeah.
We do stuff as a leisure hobby. You know, we do research. We want to research.
Your first is always, I want to get playing. I want to get playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rush it.
But now, I mean, you know, I sort of go off the beaten track, doing Normans and Saxons and Vikings and a little bit more Civil War stuff and Brunswickers and God knows what else. But I do it because I don't have to do it. I do it for pleasure now. It's not a chore. And I can take my time over it. And I can take a lot of time over, you know, putting epaulets in and piping and God knows what else that is involved with all this Napoleonic stuff. And I really enjoy doing it because it's not a chore anymore.
I'm
doing it for pleasure now.
I'm glad someone else feels like, or I'm glad that someone feels they don't have to do it.
No, I don't have to do it at all. I enjoy painting figures, listening to you guys, even Mark.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, thank you.
There'll be a strong letter from
occasionally unsubscribe, you know.
Unsubscribe.
And, you know, it's great. I love that. Because I don't have to do it. I do it for pleasure now, mate. Mark, no offense, mate. You know, I do love you dearly. I do love you dearly.
None ever taken from you, dear boy. Never.
No.
No, I never take offence on this thing, and I don't think anyone does. I think some of the conversations we have, I find incredibly stimulating, and the most important thing about these paint and chats is you have these sort of conversations, and you really do sometimes sit back and think. But it's when you look up and go, shit, I've just done a whole company.
Yeah.
Well, that's the best. I'm like, I just base coded all these tank tracks that I hate doing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
we're still
it's like
painting
you
now.
snap your fingers. Yeah.
Yeah, we're still painting now as we're doing it. We're still talking, you know, the stuff that we talk, and things are still going on.
But as you know, as I said, it's like I've always felt that wargaming is far more than just. There's so many dimensions to it as well. It's like Phil and I, when we did Eben and Mal, we knew he was down for the week, and we said we've got to get this knocked out because it's got to fit our scheduling. And we sat here and we were cutting up Fomex, and we were working on looking at the maps and think we can't bloody do this. We haven't got enough space. We're going to have to commodify what we're doing. How the hell are we going to do it? And you know what? The most pleasurable part was not the game. The game was fantastic. It was great fun. But it was the building and preparation to the point that the display was then on, and the rest of the guys turn up and do their thing, and that's the narrative for me. But I enjoy that build up. The game to me, right at the end, is just like the conclusion of my limited research time, I suppose, in some case, of looking and painting and examining and questioning and how am I going to do it. And that's the thing that I find most fascinating, if I'm brutally honest. You know,
well, I mean, you were talking when we were on about a week ago about why don't we all get together and go to Pegasus Bridge?
Yeah.
And that was a coup de main operation.
Yeah.
And of course, the British got that idea of the coup de main from the Eben Emmel raid. Let's land right on top of it. They don't expect this sudden group of people arriving right on top of us, taking us unawares, and seizing the initiative. And Pegasus Bridge was exactly like Eben ML in a lot of ways.
I mean, the Germans were very innovative under Student. Again, I have to say this. I'm not, I didn't realize, again, through the research, Adolf Hitler, it was his plan to land the gliders. Student executed it. It wasn't Student's idea. There are things that start to come out of the narrative that you don't expect, and you suddenly get caught. As I said, I think it's what James purported to, that these guys had written this stuff in the 50s and 60s when it was relatively fresh. Yet when he's cross-indexed it, hang on, this don't make sense. And that's part of the joy of research and wargaming, is finding stuff and justifying, the way you present it. Well, I've found this evidence, and that's what I'm trying to portray. It has to be balanced, of course, and it's difficult, but that's the fascination for me. The game is the final product for me. It's the final thing, and it used to be the first thing, as Matt said. The first thing, I just want to get on the table and play, but now it's the last thing. It's weird, isn't it?
No, I mean, you're saying there about...
as I said, I haven't had
you're saying there about it being Hitler's idea. I mean, Churchill had a lot of ideas. We wouldn't have had commanders without Churchill.
Yeah. But again, I found out the term commando comes from the Dutch.
The Boers. Yeah.
And he was over there as a reporter, wasn't he? And
he was captured and they let him go,
Yeah. Do you think that... I started to pontificate. Was it the effect of the commando raids in Holland by the Brandenburgers and the Fallschirmjäger that inspired his ideas? Was it the fact that he had experience in
No way.
Yeah, I don't know. And
absolutely no way. No, Churchill was in South Africa. He knew exactly what the Dutch were doing.
Yeah.
He knew exactly they were raiding behind the lines. They were causing as much destruction, getting out of there, behind the enemy lines. They knew they couldn't win the war. They were making something. They carried on the war for 3 years. It should have been over in 1 year. And he took a lot of examples from that.
Yeah, and that's the sort of conclusion I came to. But I think, obviously, it's like when we all used to laugh about Edzard's Gummiputzen. But, of course, I ended up looking at...
Gummipuppen.
And I still can't find an exact copy of what a German Gummiputzen looked like. I assumed...
They didn't have any.
I assumed it was a sack of straw.
No, they didn't have any. They didn't have any. It was a bloke called... a Gummipuppen called Rupert, which was a small guy dropped from parachutes.
No, they were dropped all over Holland.
Yeah, and Normandy.
Yeah, no. But the point is, what the thing that I found out was I couldn't find what a Gummiputzen dropped in Holland looked like. I tried to find images of them.
Well, search for Rupert.
Yeah, I think what Mark's saying is that the Germans dropped them during the invasion of the Netherlands as well.
Used to be.
No, they did. They were the first ones to come up with the idea because Student realised they didn't have enough paratroopers, and they wanted to cause confusion, which they were effective in. But I think they made them just out of straw and shoved them in Hessian sacks and tied them to the chute cables and dropped them. So from a distance, it looked like it was a paratrooper. They weren't like in the film, I don't think. Again, I don't know enough yet about 44. But James, I think we had a conversation about it. I don't think they had all those crackling things when they landed. I'm not sure. Maybe they did. But, I think the Germans were the first to really come up with that sort of conceptual idea. Again, I wasn't totally aware of that. But once it is. A lot of what the Germans did was very, very original. Very original. But they weren't the first to invent the paratroopers. That was the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union were the first to build paratrooping forces.
It's because they had those big, gigantic TBM-3s.
Yeah.
Just literally just slide off.
Walk off the wing, didn't they?
Yeah. And you could carry 4 fighters on it.
Well, in North Africa, Rommel was using inflatable tanks as well.
Yeah.
Which the British stole for Operation Fortitude.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so much you learn, I'm sure you will. I think it's harder as you go back through time because you've got less sources, haven't you? And you know, the best book that a writer can really write is finding new information about a particular period which no one's uncovered. That's always going to be entertaining. But there are so many books, aren't there, of the same vein where they've just piggybacked off what someone else has piggybacked off, what someone else has piggybacked off. And you sometimes question the originality of the work that's being done. And you're drawn new book on Stalingrad. So you go off and spend your £5.99. And you go, the first 90% is just the history of the invasion of Barbarossa or whatever. And you go, well, I know this. And then you get maybe one new insight in there.
Yeah, there's also a couple of snippets in there, isn't there?
So, you know. But I don't know. Learn a lot, that's the key thing. And as I said, the game's the final piece in the puzzle. And hopefully it will be a good one and everyone will enjoy it. And hopefully it will reflect some of the what was going on. And that's it for me. On to the next one.
For the last two or three nights, I've been talking to James about Al Murray's Road to Berlin documentary. You know, the pub landlord. It's a very good series, Mark, if you haven't seen it.
No, I haven't seen it.
No, it's very good. So look up Al Murray Road to Berlin. So it basically goes from the D-Day landings through Arnhem, through, you know, the Falaise pocket, right up to the siege of Berlin. It's very, very interesting. He jumps out of a bloody aircraft as a paratrooper, which fair play to him. You know, I wouldn't flip and do that. But he's interviewing guys who were there. You know, he interviews Wally Parr, who was at Pegasus Bridge. He was the guy who shelled the hospital and the water tower. It's a very good series, that one. 6 episodes.
All right.
Funnily enough, now I don't know if it was that one. It might not have been that one, but there was a similar series. It might have been the one by Tony Robinson. And
Tony.
Yeah.
Tony, yeah.
Tony.
And I had been watching it, and they were interviewing, or he was interviewing or speaking to a veteran who was tank crew, and who stood and gave an interview to the camera that said their Sherman tanks weren't very good because the petrol engines meant they exploded, which is utter tosh. And you know, it's been quite categorically proven that it had nothing to do with the engines and everything to do with the ammo storage on the tanks, and the fact that they lined inside of the turrets with shells and they had them rolling about on the floor and all this sort of stuff. So these fires that the Shermans were renowned for were cordite related rather than petrol related. But here you've got a man who served in them, fought in them, and he's repeating what is basically an urban myth. You know, in a documentary, and no one's saying, "Oh, hold on a minute," you know.
What are you gonna do? Call the guy a liar to his face?
Well,
exactly.
No, what you do is
the interview.
What you do, Dennis, is you ring up that great documentary presenter called Neil Oliver, who has done the best documentaries of the Second World War in Scotch, and I love that man. I love him so much. He's very, very good. Wouldn't you agree, James?
No comment. Unsubscribe.
I think the answer is unsubscribe. Unsubscribe. Neil Oliver, God bless him.
Yeah.
Is he the guy that worked with Tony Pollard?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, he's done work with everybody, mate. He's brilliant.
He's done some. He had a recent documentary where he talked about all the immigration from the Highlands of Scotland without once mentioning the Highland clearances. It's quite impressive.
I know Tony.
Oh, he's very switched on.
I know Tony.
Very
Pollard.
switched on.
I know Tony Pollard well. I went up to Edinburgh and met him, and Tony and I, because he runs battlefield archaeology, probably one of the primary battlefield archaeologists in this country, and he worked with this guy Neil Oliver, and then they separated.
Great blog.
But Tony was a little bit more into, I suppose, looking at it quite intensely. I mean, they did a good. The Two Men in a Trench was quite a good series, I thought, in terms of its conceptual ideas. I don't know whether it was historically brilliant, but you know, I was quite interested. And he was very interesting to talk to, and we had long conversations. And he's very good at what he does, and he does it properly. And battlefield archaeology at that time now it's very much or conflict archaeology, I think it's what it's termed now. It's a growing new sort of I suppose art. I mean, people have always dug battlefields and things, but they've never done it in such a prescribed manner now, I suppose. There's much more theory and, the different approaches to it. Obviously, as James was saying about new technology, the last thing you ever do is dig it up until you've got everything. If you can use sat imagery, LIDAR, ground penetrating radar, the historicals, all of that sort of stuff. And Time Team sort of alluded to what was going on, but if you know what Time Team really is, it's certainly not done in 24 hours, I can tell you that. And there's hardly any of those reports have ever been written up.
No, unless Neil Oliver does it, in which case it is done within 24 hours.
You're cruising for a bruising.
And he does it very, very well, actually. Neil Oliver. Can't fault him, really.
Now, why are you cross with Neil Oliver? What's the reason?
Have we got an hour?
All right, let's just
go, Jamesy. Go, Jamesy.
Politics.
Yeah. Anyway, that's as far as I know. That's my tuppence I can put in on that one. Oh. Well, my Foamex bunkers look very nice. But that's very important, and I've got them finished, and then my bits of the pieces of the fort are done. And I've finished my Belgian thing, which I can put my video up, and that's fast paint done on that platoon lot.
What material do you use for your baseboards, for your buildings?
Well, the big problem, and I use heavy card. Don't do it.
Right.
Use wood. For Christ's sake, use wood, because with the amount of inundation I've had in that shed, everything is warped to buggery. It's ruined. So I would strongly recommend a very thin MDF or ply if you're going to do those sort of base build ideas. And one of the things I'm looking at, James, is paint on your pavements. This is a thing. Phil and I were saying, every time you do a little town, the one thing that's always missing is the bloody pavement. But you look at the larger scale models and the 148s and the 28 mil, they've always got pavements. But in most of our 15 or 10 mil, you don't have pavements. And yet, I know that's a silly small point, but it will make your set ping, I think. And I've started to explore pavement law. That's my go-to idea. Try and make the streets look a little bit more interesting than 3 buildings, and a road.
I'm just not. I would have to look into whether pavements were common in Normandy. A lot of the pictures I see, it's kind of a street with buildings or gardens, yards backed onto it.
Yeah, I mean it's difficult, isn't it? It's because sorry.
Carry on. I'm just talking crap French.
No, it's because I have to strike the set and rebuild the set. And one set could be, a river thing, and then the next one I've got a little town or a little village. And I try not to be too generic, and I try and use the photographs, but it's very difficult at times. James, you've shown me some of your photos, and you've got some great imagery there to work on your sets. And I think just go with what you've got there, because that's your bag. And unless you're intending to expand it out and go all the way to Berlin or something, then you're going to need that flexibility. But if you're
we do have enough buildings that we could do Berlin at the one guy's place.
Yeah,
he's a Russian player, so he bought probably $1,000 worth of buildings. So we can do Stalingrad or Berlin or something like that. It's just it doesn't make for. I don't know. It's just not the greatest of games.
Yeah,
no.
It looks cool. At the moment, I'm just sticking with Normandy and the various villages and towns that are related.
Well, I mean that's the thing. If you concentrate on that, you'll get and stick with what you're doing. This is my advice. Always stick with what you love and just keep doing it, because you naturally develop. When I was in Japan once, it's really interesting. This guy comes up to me and we're in a bar, and I couldn't really speak a lot of Japanese. I barely speak a word of it, But it was really interesting.
Konnichiwa?
Konnichiwa, yeah.
Konnichiwa.
That's about it. And I was in this bar and I was talking to my teacher, and he was saying, if someone has a passion in something, whatever it is, you will always be able to connect with someone else who has a passion, even if you can't speak the language. And to this night, and to this day, I don't know how, but I'm sure I had a conversation with this guy. He was very passionate about what he did, and I was very passionate about what I did, and we seemed to be able to communicate. And it comes back to the old thing of, a master plumber can talk with an astrophysicist, and you may think, well, how is that possible? But they've got the same depth of understanding about their particular things. A master plumber is going to know everything about lead piping, and indirectly he'll probably understand the chemistry of it or the physics of it, because he works around it so much. So he can speak to someone who's probably studying the universe. I know it sounds puzzling, but they just have that depth of knowledge, and they can acknowledge and understand each other's work. But that night was the weirdest night of my life, and I go back to it sometimes, and I don't remember speaking Japanese. I certainly couldn't. He couldn't speak English, yet we seemed to connect and understand certain things. It was bizarre. It was a bizarre evening, I can tell you. And I hadn't had that much sake.
I was going to say.
But, it was quite...
I think we'll read between the lines and actually say that Mark had quite a lot of sake there, which means that there was domo arigato isoge wakarimasu ka was going on, yeah.
Probably called him Godzilla.
Or Gaijin, and it was just
Gary's about 2 minutes away from a bridge over the River Kwai.
Yeah. But it's like, it's like when I watched that film, what is it, Downfall. I don't speak really much German. I can understand a few words and sentences and conversation. But when I watched that film, I was just gripped by the performance. And I don't, again, remember reading the subtitles. I was just gripped by the performance and the narrative. And
that's very well done. Very well done.
He was phenomenal. I think all of them were. I think it was an incredible piece. I think, certainly how I would probably see some of it. I thought they did it really well. But again, that's a pure German film, isn't it? And it's a great piece.
Yeah, like Das Boot.
Yeah. Oh, Das Boot. Incredulous. Great film. How you could shoot an entire film in a small tin can is beyond me. But they did.
It's like Apollo 13.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And Findus, the story, set in Grimsby.
Yeah, good stuff. Oh, all right. Oh, there comes the rain. I've just put all that bloody sodding gloss all over the bloody dust. I've been, obviously, if you've read my post, I was saying that the Memsab is back tomorrow. So I was running around this afternoon, and I've got 2 coats of undercoat on. I've just got the top coat on, and it's just pissing with rain. Happy days.
Of course.
Tell her you did more, but it all got washed away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll just lie, basically, as I do. But
typical man.
She got really clever, and she said, I want, she said, Marcus. I know I'm in trouble when she calls me that. And she goes,
Marcus?
Yeah, she calls me Marcus.
Marcus?
Yeah,
Roman name.
When I'm in deep shit, I'm called Marcus. I can tell you. And she said, I'd like to see a tour of the works. I said, what? She said, well, you've got an iPad. Take me around the house. Show me what you've done. I'm like, oh, shit. I'm caught out now. I'm like, oh, dear. So I said, yeah, it's not working. The iPad doesn't work that well. And she goes, no, you will take it around now. And I knew I was then in the big troubles. I was in the Hattie Jakes mode. And that was going to be deep trouble, matron.
You, so, Dr. Nuki.
So I took her out to the first cut. I took her out to the front and I showed her what I'd done. She said, oh, that's really good. Well done. Took her out the back. That looks fantastic. And they said, how much have you done in the bathroom? At which point I then conveniently dropped the iPad onto the sofa I went,
Static,
and then he
static.
sent a text back saying,
You couldn't
I'm
make
really
this up,
sorry,
really,
but
could you?
the thing's buggered.
The batteries ran out.
But I know tomorrow night, the first thing she'll do, she'll come through the door and she'll be, I want to see the bathroom.
Oh yeah.
So if I don't pull my finger out tomorrow, I'm a dead duck. That will be the end of Hengist. He died for the cause.
Well, I think that'll be the end of Marcus.
The great unsubscribe. The great unsubscribe in the sky.
Yeah, the great unsubscribe in the sky. Yes. I wonder how many people have actually unsubscribed tonight.
More than were subscribed to start off with.
Oh, right. Okay.
I'll see how many subscribers.
I'm astounded that you take the piss out of me looking like Charles Hawtrey and your name is Marcus.
Yeah, it's not Marcus. That's what she calls me.
Marcus.
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 It's a very.
Wow, schnell abwagen. Handy hock.
I'm sure she swears at you in Latin.
No, she's her father's. She was. I don't know how to. She worked for British Airways when she was younger. She worked in the clubs. She lived up in London, and she was a bit of. She liked a good wealthy lifestyle. Her father was a builder, and as dodgy as they come, I keep saying, if you call that square, mate, I don't know what it is. And I said, they still go around and go, that's a Hollerborn house, isn't it? And he goes, well, what do you mean by that? And I said, because he was a snowdrop, wasn't he, in the bloody army, the RAF police, wasn't he? So I'm always taking the mickey of Snow Fairy. But he's about 6'4" and used to row for God knows, he's a big fella. But she was his little, he indulged.
No, Mrs. No, shut your face. No.
Yeah. Loads of cars.
No, go on.
Go on.
No, go on.
She's class in a glass. Samantha is a class in a glass. Really. But she is bloody funny.
Oh, shh. No, shut your face.
Shut your face.
Shut your face now. Now, go on, Mrs.
Is that up Pompeii, isn't it? Oh, no.
Yeah. We've suddenly reached Frankie Howard mode here.
Yeah. I love Frankie Howard. Is he dead now? I assume he is, Gary, isn't he?
Oh, yes, he is. No, shut your face.
Gary's a reincarnation of him.
No, I'm reincarnation, yeah. I'm keeping all alive, mate.
Yeah, so I have to be very, very careful with the mem side. But of course, this is live, and if she's tuned in, well, I'm in for the. I'll tell you what.
There's nobody still tuned in. Come on, let's be honest here.
Yeah.
You're lucky we're still here.
Yeah, bloody right, mate. So, how's have we had some new people join us, or
not now? We were on the verge.
We had 6 in the wings.
They were waiting. They were fluttering now.
But the production was shut down.
No, Mrs. I think there's a mention of Dr. Nuki.
Yeah.
That would have got them in, actually.
Do you think so?
The old Sid James laugh.
Yeah. You're very good, Gary. You should go on stage, mate. Oh, you do, don't you, on a Thursday night?
I do, yeah.
Wheels?
Yeah, but the thing is, you do the same laugh as well, mate, so we should do a double act.
Yes, that's
Will I say, you're an absolute shower.
Hard cheese.
All right, fellas, that's going to be it for me. Speaking of hard cheese, I got to go eat something.
Yeah, good. Good for you.
Won't be hard cheese, though.
Yeah.
Soft cheese.
They don't have hard cheese in Canada.
No.
He's off to see a girl. Ding dong. Ding dong. You're a sweet little thing. Ding dong.
Catch later, Dennis.
Yeah.
Unsubscribe.
I think we should unsubscribe this one now. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I'll turn it off.
Cut.
Cut.
Okay, that's us. I'm hitting
Nurse.